Okay, it's English 201, week 2, part 4. So you now understand the basics of rhythm and rhyme. This should help you understand. This is the reason poetry looks the way it does is because oftentimes the poets are arranging words so that there is a pattern of rhyme with the last word in each line, and also there's a certain number of syllables in each line, and often there is a rhythm to how they arrange the stress and unstressed parts of it. So there is a pattern of stresses and there's a pattern of stresses across the line. There's a set number of syllables per line, and the lines at the end, the words at the end often rhyme. And why do poets do this? Because it makes things memorable and true. There's one more aspect to sound that I want to teach you, which is there's other kinds of sound effects. So it has to do with repetition of consonants, repetition and contrast of consonants and vowels. So it's repetition of consonants and repetition of vowels, contrast of consonants, and contrast of vowels. This sounds ridiculous. Let me give you let me give you an example of this. This is a poem by Alexander Pope. This is just part of the poem. Soft is the strain when zephyr gently blows, and the smooth stream in smoother numbers flows. But when loud surges lash the sounding shore, the hoarse, rough verse should like the torrent roar. Zephyr just means wind. Notice these first two lines are about wind and stream, like a river, a flowing river. But these two lines are about crashing waves. So notice that this part, these first two lines, sound smooth because they're about a smooth wind and a smooth stream. But these next two lines, which are about crashing waves, sound rough because the waves are rough. So notice, how do they do this? Well, notice that there's a lot of S's and Z's, and the whole thing is easy to say. Soft is the strain when zephyr gently blows, and the smooth stream in smoother numbers flows. See how the words flow into each other? But for the second part, the words are harder to say because we're not describing something smooth, we're describing something rough. But when loud surges, see how you can go smooth stream is easy to say, but loud surges is harder to say. Hoarse, rough verse. Hoarse, rough verse. It's harder to say than soft is the strain. What the poet is doing here is that he's chosen, he wants to, because he's describing something smooth, he tries to use consonants and vowels that make it sound smooth. And when he's describing something rough, he tries to use consonants and vowels to make it sound rough. This is really the hardest thing, I think, for students to kind of learn. So I'm going to teach it to you in the simplest way that I know how. Cellar door and washed sheets. On the count of 3, say cellar door out loud. 1, 2, 3. Cellar door. 1, 2, 3. Cellar door. 1, 2, 3. Cellar door. Do you hear how, if you didn't speak English, you might think cellar door was one word? Cellar door. It's one word flows smoothly into the next. Cellar door. On the count of 3, say washed sheets. Washed sheets. 1, 2, 3. Washed sheets. 1, 2, 3. Washed sheets. 1, 2, 3. Washed sheets. See how washed sheets is not smooth at all? But cellar door is very smooth. When poets are writing, if they're describing something nice and pleasant and smooth, they try to use words that sound like cellar door. But when they're describing something that is rough or difficult or hard, they try to use words like washed sheets because it's like hard to say. Why is it hard to say, by the way? It's because of the consonants. You have to finish washed. You have to say sht before you can start sheets. Washed sheets. Washed sheets. But cellar door, you just go it connects directly from one to the other. Cellar door. It's easy to say. It's easier on your mouth. Cellar door. Washed sheets. So if the poet is describing something smooth or nice, they're going to want to use a phrase like cellar door. And if they're describing something difficult or hard, they're going to want to use a phrase like washed sheets. All right. And that was sound. Now, sounds hard. Most of my students, and this is partly a function of there being too many students in the classroom. Online makes it even worse. Plus, a lot of my students, English is not their first language. And oh my God, English is hard enough to learn without having to deal with syllable stresses and consonant clusters. And like, it's a whole complicated thing. So it's difficult. And so I don't like to sort of quiz you or harass you on this. I just want you to know that this exists. I'm not going to be talking about this a lot, but when we're reading Shakespeare, a lot of people talk about what a beautiful writer Shakespeare is. This is one of those things they're talking about. He does this kind of thing, the sort of cellar door, washed sheets, alone, 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 alone thing. Does it better than anybody. That's what they're talking about. Now, in order to get you to appreciate that, I need like to have a classroom with 5 people in it, and I have to make you say things out loud slowly all the time. It's just difficult. So my only point is I just want you to know that it exists. So I think we did it. This is good. You now have your 5 key terms, of which you really only need 4. You don't need sound. But it's summary, metaphor, irony, theme, and sound. And that's it. Those are your 5 key terms. You'll probably only use 4. If you use 4, I will be happy. If you only use summary, I will be unhappy. If you ever are able to use sound and talk about sound in a paper, I will be fucking impressed. But you do not have to do that. Okay, cool. So what I want to do next is put this all together. You guys have learned a lot of things. You guys have learned a lot of stuff. And what I want to do next is, sorry, I got to move some things around here. What I want to do next is take a look at a poem. Now, the poem I'm going to have you look at next is fucking impossible. I'm actually going to tell you a really embarrassing story about this poem. I'm obsessed with Shakespeare. So I probably read like 28. I read 28 Shakespeare plays. And when I say I read 28 Shakespeare plays, I mean I read the plays, then I read them again in like a fancy teacher edition with like hundreds of footnotes. Then I read like 3 books about each play, and then I watched all the available movies of each play. So basically, I ended up reading 28 Shakespeare plays twice with footnotes, and then reading 100 books about those plays, and then watching 100 movies about those plays. I'm real into Shakespeare. And then I'm also real into comic books, and I got this Batman comic book, and in the Batman comic book, they put a Shakespeare poem, and it was a Shakespeare poem that I had never heard of before. It's called The Phoenix and the Turtle, and I was like, what the fuck? I mean, I guess I had heard of it, but I didn't, it's not famous. It's like not a very famous work of Shakespeare's. Shakespeare wrote a lot of shit, and not all of it's great. Um, but I opened up the Batman comic book, and then here's this poem called it's The Phoenix and the Turtle, and the whole poem is printed in the Batman comic book. And I was like reading it, and I was reading, and I read it again, and I read it again, and I realized like I'm like a smart person who reads a lot of poetry, and this poem is hard to fucking understand. So of course I got real into it, and I started like researching shit. I went on the internet to try to find some explanations, and the internet did not have any good explanations on it. You think everything's on there, but it's not. Internet's got a lot of bullshit on it. So I ended up having to find some books about this and really find out about the poem. And I did. And so now I know a little bit more about it, and it's an extraordinarily difficult poem to understand, but it's very short. It's by my favorite author. It's a really neat poem, and I thought it would be something where we could just take a look at it, and you could get to see summary, metaphor, irony, theme, and sound all working together on one single page. So I'll pick that up in the next video.